Hi there, Malcolm here with my 141st Booktube video, and today I'll be bringing you my January wrap-up. I managed 13 titles this month, so let's get cracking. First up was my book of the month, Space Captain Smith by Toby Frost. I've reviewed this in a separate video, so I'll leave a link to that down below, so go check that out if you want to know what I thought of that. And then after that I then read Star Wars The Quillian Trilogy Book 2, The Assault at Salonia by Roger McBride Allen. Something hinky's going on in the Quillian sector. Leia, Han and the kids have all been split up. And Luke's off with Lando trying to find Lando a wife. Really enjoyed book 1. I thought that was a very good start to a trilogy. This one did dip a little bit. It wasn't quite as intense. Now it did suffer a little bit from being the second book of a trilogy. But no time was it boring. No time did it slow down too much. There was enough intrigue in here to keep me interested. Like with the first book, all the characters felt like they belonged there. They weren't just thrown in because, hey, it's this character. No, they actually had a reason for being there, they had a purpose, and they fitted into it nicely. Answers aren't particularly forthcoming. There's another book to come still, but really easy to read and a solid read. Booktastic. And then after that, I then read Halo graphic novel. This is done by various authors and illustrators. This is set around the original 3 games, which did put me at a bit of a disadvantage because I've only played the first one. It's all the PC had at the time. Each story is told in a very different art style, which gave each story a very unique feel to it. Unlike with most things, art is very much up to the eye of the beholder, some of which I liked, some of which I didn't like. The book did struggle a bit for me in that because I didn't know who the characters were particularly, and some of the artwork I didn't find was very clear in what was going on. The stories were lost on me, but there were pretty pictures to look at. It was easy to read. I'd recommended it for fans of Halo rather than just casual comic book readers. It's worth reading. And after that, I then finally read How Obliques Fell into the Magic Potion When He Was a Little Boy by Goscinny and Underzo. This is a tie into the Asterix series that I have been reading, and as the title suggests, it gives the story that has been alluded to throughout the series of what happened to Obliques, meaning that he was permanently imbued with the powers of the magic potion. In execution, it's more of a storybook with text on one side and a beautifully illustrated picture on the other. I do like Obliques' pre-Dogmatics toy, but the story is not particularly exciting. Doesn't really tell you much more than the title, to be honest, but the pictures really do make the book. Buy it if you want a complete collection, but not really essential. And after that I then read brand new Asterix and the Griffin, where Asterix, Obliques, Getafix and Dogmatics travel to Siberia to help out a friend of Getafix's who's got a spot of Roman bother. They're looking for the fabled Griffin for Caesar. Now, with the unfortunate deaths of the original creators of Asterix, I found the more recent stuff to be okay, not nearly as good as the original. This one really surprised me. It was absolutely fantastic. Even though Dogmatics is out of the story for most of it, I like the panels with Dogmatics in them. I enjoyed the story, I like the twists, I like the unique angle they went for, and the big reveal at the end as to what this Griffin actually was, I thought worked really well. Very clever story. And again, the illustrations are pretty good. Booktastic. And then I read The 12 Tasks of Asterix. This is the novelisation of the film of the same name and contains recreated art from the film interspersed with text. And I really like the way the story is told. Now, it's basically a narration of the film, but done in a quite unique way. I really enjoyed it. It's been a while since I've seen the film. I would argue it would be a better time to watch it instead, but I'd say this is worth buying. And then I moved on to Asterix vs. Caesar. Now, this book annoyed me for 2 reasons. It's the last book of the Asterix series that I've ever read, and it's always been with this cover amongst all these other books which I knew and loved. The edition I managed to get hold of hasn't even got the same cover. Okay, the picture's the same, but we've got all this red stuff. So that was the first annoyance. The second one was the content. Now, I've not seen this film, which appears to be a lazy mashup of Asterix the Legionary and Asterix the Gladiator, where instead of giving me unique artwork, they've literally taken stills from the film and interspersed the text around it. And some pages don't even have text, you just got to try and infer what's going on from the series of pictures. Now, this is supposed to be a novelisation, not just a slideshow of what was on the screen. The text itself was abysmal. I really phoned this one in. Told by the point of view of Asterix and Caius Flavius Ottus, a character who isn't even relevant until well into the second half of the story. Really lazily done, and any curiosity I had in seeing the film has gone, which is a real shame. Boring, just plain dull. All the good books are the jokes from Legionary and Gladiator, but not done as well. Ugh. After that, I then read the not at all controversial Tintin in the Congo. Having finished Asterix, it's now on to Tintin. I think we pretty much got the whole collection, with the exception of Tintin in the Land of the Soviets. And this is the first time I've read it. I do have it in French, but my French is atrocious, and so I could only go by the story by what the pictures were showing me. And the pictures were pretty much Tintin single-handedly wiping out all animal life in Africa, which wasn't the best thing. Now, this wasn't the first Tintin book I'd read, so Tintin had already been well established for me by the time I'd read this. So that, you know, really out of character for him to be quite so destructive toward the wildlife. But it was great seeing what the actual plot was about. I wouldn't have guessed. I knew it was a man trying to kill him for some reason. I didn't know why. And it wasn't until even the end of this story to actually find out that it's something to do with Al Capone and diamond mines. Now, I'm well aware that this is a controversial book. I'm not going to touch on that. Other people have been much more loquacious about it than I could ever be. And even reading it in English, my biggest issue was with the decimation of the animal life. However, there's one scene that really stuck out to me, and this encounter with a rhinoceros. In the English version, he gets tired, hangs his rifle up, has a snooze under a tree. A rifle manages to unhook the rifle and shoot it, nearly taking Tintin out before running off. And that is his encounter with the rhino. Now, bearing in mind this is a controversial book for various racial reasons, that was the only bit that they changed from the French. In the original French, he encounters the rhino, shoots it, and it's impervious to his bullets, and so he ends up putting some dynamite in its back, setting it off and blowing it into its component parts. Now, as a young child, that had seriously impacted me. It's not really an image that I was ever able to remove from my brain. And so when I turned to that page in the English version, I thought, hang on, where's that? Why have they changed that one piece? Obviously, blowing up rhinos is a bit too far. Everything else is okay. Anyway, Tintin in the Congo, I'd say it's worth reading, but it's important to know what you're in for before you open the book, and why it's problematic. So, after that, I then read Star Wars The Quillian Trilogy, Book 3, Showdown at Centerpoint, also by Roger McBride Allen. So this is the concluding story of the trilogy. Did it pay off? Yes, it did. This was a fantastic conclusion to a brilliant trilogy. I'll say Book 2 was a bit slower, but I think my one critique would be perhaps the revelation at the end really was within the last 40 pages. You don't even find out who was behind it until then. And of course, once that's revealed, the conclusion is pretty quick, particularly after 3 books to get there. But no, this is absolutely brilliant. Really enjoyed it. And certainly the last trilogy I had read was that awful Black Fleet Crisis trilogy, which was just dire. This is a breath of fresh air. And I would say for anyone who wants to read some OG Star Wars stories, and you know you've already done the Thrawn trilogy, because everyone says do the Thrawn trilogy, it's worth doing, it's a good one. The Quillian trilogy is another strong trilogy to go for. Absolutely brilliant. You don't need to know too much about the expanded universe or the extra characters. Mara Jade pops up, but her introduction is pretty much covered in the book, so you don't need to know too much about who she is at this point. And apart from that, you already know everyone else from the films. Booktastic. And as a trilogy, booktastic. And after that, I then read Tintin in America, as a sort of sequel to Tintin in the Congo, with Al Capone's influence being finally mentioned toward the end of the book. He travels to Chicago to deal with organised crime. Needless to say, the scenes with the Native Americans are a little dated now, but the rest of it was pretty good. And it's another Tintin I've read for the first time, and I didn't even have this in French. This was a first look, first read, and I must say I really enjoyed it. The story took a nice logical path, unlike with the Congo where there was no story really. And I've started making a tally of how many times Tintin is shot and bludgeoned over the head, as well as some of his most unlikeliest of escapes from scenarios. For example, in this one, he's thrown into a meat mincing machine. How does he get out of that one? Well, it just happens to coincide with a factory strike, and so they turned off the machines to go on strike. What a coincidence. Or he's gassed by the mob and thrown into the river to drown, but somehow they mixed up the canisters and gave him sleeping gas instead, and not enough of it to make him not wake up when he hits the cold water. And how does he get out of being thrown into the lake with heavy weights tied to his feet? Oh, they're the dummy wooden weights that happen to float. They're quite hilarious if you actually tally them up. Just how ridiculous it is. Anyway, buy it. Really enjoyed it. Next up, I then read Doctor Who, The Way Through the Woods by Una McCormack. And in this one, there is some woods where people just go into and never come out of. The local town knows these woods are a bit odd and generally steer clear of them, but every 50 years or so, somebody goes too close and is never seen again. So the Doctor, Rory and Amy do their best to try and track down where some of these missing people have gone. So we have Rory in 1917 following a young lady into the woods, Amy in modern day era following a journalist into the woods, and the Doctor doing his best to find them both, but he's been arrested on suspicion of kidnapping various people who have disappeared in the woods. I found that's really quite a solid story. All the characters felt like they were supposed to. I like the dialogue between them all. The story itself was pretty good. The ending was typically Doctor Who style, but then, it says Doctor Who on the front cover, so that shouldn't be surprising. But it didn't overplay the nonsensical Doctor Who stuff to make the story meaningless. Really enjoyed it. Worth buying. Although I would say the front cover is a little bit misleading. I won't say any more than that. And then I read Tintin and the Broken Ear. This is a reread. I've read this one many, many times. And in this one, an Amazonian tribal fetish is stolen from a museum, only to be replaced, apparently. But Tintin quickly spots it's a copy, and he goes on the track to find out where the original was, the one that actually has a broken ear, whereas the copy's ears are intact, hence the title. Also on the case are two nefarious characters who rack up quite a high body count for a Tintin story. They're generally 1 or 2 deaths throughout the story, but these guys, they go on quite a rampage. And again, quite a solid story. A good adventure, a good mystery, and a quite good reveal at the end as well. Some people might take issue of Tintin's blackface disguise on the ship, and his unlikely escape from this one is he's in a little hut out in the middle of nowhere, about to be shot by one of the bad guys, when a bolt of lightning strikes the chimney of that hut, and ball lightning flies into the room and knocks him out through the window, allowing him to escape. Call it nostalgia, but I'll say this is booktastic. And then finally, I also read Trust Your Eyes by Linwood Barclay. I have to say, I've finished reading this one. Reading history of this one's a bit complex. I started it about 3 years ago. This was a book I had on my desk at work, and it was there for emergencies, for if I'd finished the book I brought in, or I'd forget to bring my book in, then I at least had something to read during my lunch break. I got about halfway through, and then my job came to a conclusion, and I've either been unemployed or working from home ever since. And of course, I've got plenty of books to read here. And so it's been sitting on my shelf collecting dust. And I thought, this is ridiculous, I want to finish it. Meant to do it last year, but never quite managed to read my planned reading, so never got to it. I did pretty well in January, so I thought, I bet I can finish this, and I did. Anyway, with that out of the way, the story is about a pair of brothers who are brought together with the death of their father after an apparent tractor mower accident. And so Ray comes over to try and give his brother Thomas a hand in sorting out the house and just looking after him, because Thomas is on some spectrum. I'm not going to say which one, I think it makes it clear which one it is, but he's on a spectrum somewhere. And he spends his days sitting on his computer doing the in-story equivalent of Google Earth, wandering up and down city streets, remembering every single layout of every single city, in case there's a blackout and all the maps are wiped out and they need somebody to know where things are. However, Thomas happens to go up one particular street, look up at one particular window to see a face in a plastic bag being murdered. Well, not the face, the whole person, obviously. And from there, the story unfolds. We do get the point of view of the murderers and why this person was murdered and what that was all about. And so the story bounces between the two brothers as they try to find out just what this face is about, and with the murderers trying to cover up the fact that they murdered somebody. This actually came across as a pretty solid thriller. I thought the depiction of a neurologically divergent character was adequately done. I mean, he did have a bit of a savantness about him by being able to remember all the streets, but then that was what he was at. That's all he did all day, every day. So, if anyone dedicates themselves to a hobby to that level of degree, you're going to remember pretty much all of it. And his interaction with the other characters was fine. He wasn't, didn't come across as incapable of interacting with the other characters. He didn't come across as less of a human being. It was just acknowledged that he was not capable of looking after a house by himself with all the bills, mortgages, cleaning, all the minutiae that homeowners have to go through. So I thought that he did a good balance of giving his character a neurological condition, but at the same time remaining the humanity within him. So well done there. The fact that I picked this up after 2 years told me that the story was still compelling enough for me to want to finish it, and I really enjoyed it. It's not a book I'm going to keep, but I'm glad to have read it. It was worth reading. And there we go, 13 books. I'm pretty pleased with that. How was your reading in the first month of the year? Some people said it was a very long month. Well, I didn't particularly. So, remember your comments please down below, but as usual, if you have nothing nice to say, then please keep it to yourself. Thank you, and until next time, see you later.